Hi, hello, and welcome or welcome back, I suppose. Apologies for any camera shakiness. Zelda is currently very comfy on my desk, and I don't want to move her, so we just have me holding my phone because that's what we're getting, because Zelda comes first. Speaking of the cats, today we're doing something a little bit different. I have my tin of books. I'm going to rummage around. I'm going to take four out, and then I'm going to present to the cats where they get a pair each, and then they get to choose what I read in the week. It's a lovely little. Oh, she's moving now. Of course you are. Hello. Right on my leg. Claws out. Really appreciate that. But I figure this might be a little fun, little thing to do. Just let my cats read my books. Read my books. They can if they like. Choose my books and yeah, enjoy my Doritos. I had Doritos yesterday and I haven't put the packet away yet. Put it away. It's quite early in the morning, leave me be. Let's just get on with it, shall we? These are the four choices. Just in case it isn't one that's chosen, I just want to show you, because I obviously don't know when I will ever get around to this. I love shit like that. I just also the top you can see here, like this isn't just like printed to look like that, it is actually textured. This is probably actually part of the reason I would have picked up the book, because I know me, I'm a textural bitch. It's probably all the mental illnesses. Anyway, I'm also not filming with my microphone because I forgot that it existed, so enjoy that crunchy sound quality, but it'll improve when I'm filming the review parts. Hello, Miss Zelda. Yes, you have an important choice to make. Which one do you like? Well, I think you've made yourself clear, haven't you? You're now sniffing Lily, but I can't read that. So do you want this one? Is it this one? Okay, that one's getting a good sniff. What about this? Now for the little creature. Baby! Come here. Well, Lily doesn't at all seem very interested in helping me out. In fact, she's just cleaning, and this has been a constant. Every time I try and help, she either walks away or yeah. So, Miss Zelda is getting to choose two books today because she deserves it, because she's being helpful. Which one do you want? Do you want a horror book or a drama book? Neither? Okay, shall we do a big sniff test? What do you want? Do you want this? Okay, we've got a little bit of sniff and rub. And then what about this? Oh, it's this. We're reading an old horror book. Let's go, gamers. The benefit of the doubt. See, this is what I mean. She doesn't care. She's not interested in this. Lily, come here. What's this or this? Have you seen one? Do you want to see which one you like? Do you want to give anything a sniff? If I can pick that up. Couldn't care less. Yes, there is bird poo on my window. No, I can't do anything to clear that up. It's on the outside. So, Zelda's getting two choices because Lily... Yeah.
So, first up, we have Lily's choice. Thank you to Miss Zelda for actually being cooperative. And we will be looking at Breaking Up by Nicholas Pine, and this is part of his Terror Academy series. Now, just before I get to the actual review, I want to say, I don't know how clear it was when you first saw the books, but it's very clearly an old book. I got it, or at the very least, I don't know how old this is. I didn't look that up. In fact, I think it's on here. It's been knocked off by one of the cats. Just one moment. Yeah, so this book first came out in 94. I mean, so it's not, ancient. But in terms of, it's what? Hang on, about to do maths. 29 years old, so it's not a young book by any means. All of it clearly started life as a library book at a school, all from the late 90s. You can very faintly see the dates in it, and just looking at it, you can see it is a well used book. It is faded around the edges, the spine isn't entirely intact, so I figured that there may be a few loose pages, in fact maybe even a page or two missing. What I wasn't expecting is pages 3 to 8 or 3 to 9, yeah, 3 to 8 to not only be missing but be completely torn out. And I do mean torn. It's really obvious. You can see that there is a part at the top where they would have been, I can't tell if that's focusing, I hope so, where it's been torn out. So I figured, why don't I go on Amazon? I'll see if there's a Kindle version somewhere. Just, I can get it for cheap, get it on Kindle, and make sure I've got the full book. That didn't happen. There was one single Amazon listing, and it was £93.51, and there was one copy of the book. I'm assuming either this is just one of those books that's not really in print anymore, so, well, it's going to be a book that's no longer in print anymore, so either this is somebody selling a rare copy, or it's if you buy this it will be a reprint. Occasionally that does happen. It's a sort of almost made to order. There are some books that are like that if they're out of print but the publisher, it's of an upon request type thing, but I don't think that would be done via Amazon. I feel like you would have to contact the publisher with that. But yeah, safe to say, I just went, I'll see if I can figure it out. And I did. It was fine. I didn't have to worry too much about those. Yes, I'm sure there was some context there that would have been nice, but I managed to find my way relatively quickly. And like I say, I wanted to say that before I got to the review because A, I have missed a few pages, and B, I wanted to do that pre-review because it isn't exactly Nicholas Pine's fault that the pages are missing. So it's not review purposes, but it does give you a bit of context for my journey through reading this book. But onto the actual review section now. See, I thought this book would be kind of camp, a bit cheesy, but overall, hopefully, enjoyable. One of those books where I am not reading it to get some cultured, highbrow perfection out here. I'm not looking for anything like that. I'm not looking for literary fiction. I'm not looking for anything, like I say, highbrow. I'm just looking for a bit of camp, silly fun. But see, the biggest issue with this book is that it's not only, every book has an intended audience, but this feels like it's really trying to hit that intended audience. So it becomes clear very quickly that it's for a teen audience just by the characters. So I was talking about this today actually. You can usually base who a book is for mostly given the age of the characters. And in this case, the characters are about 18. They're in their final year of high school in the States. And then I was thinking, sure, they are 18, but the writing style first feels like it's meant for younger teenagers to look at older teenagers. That kind of, when you're in your sort of that 10 to 13, 14 range, that perhaps tween, early teen age, where late teens seems that's an adult over there, and they seem bigger and cooler and all that sort of stuff. It feels a little bit at first like you're reading that, and I thought, okay, that's fair. It's not uncommon. It's not entirely uncommon for stuff for younger teens to feature some older teens as a kind of, God, I wish I was like them, or I hope I get to grow up to be like them kind of thing, even if it's a really frightening situation. Because at the end of the day, this is one of those where it's really frightening, but it's still really cool and like escapism kind of thing. Like spooky escapism, I guess, but it's still escapism. But it doesn't just feel like it's for a young teen audience, because that's fine. Even if it was not what I was expecting going in, I would know that had I bought this new, because it's the sort of thing where it would have featured in a particular area of a bookshop. It would have been more with the teen section rather than being with the adult fiction, or it would have been in a YA section type thing, right? But consider that I am now reading as an adult. I understand, okay, I've got to this point where it's for teenagers, so I'm now reading it through that lens. I understand that there's going to be some simplification of language, and I understand that we're probably going to heighten emotions a little bit more than we do with regular adult fiction, because teenagers are generally rather more emotional than adults. It's just, they're fucking hormonal, it happens. And also, you're trying to give that kind of, here, maybe process your emotions via some work, right? Via some reading. That is what some teen fiction is used for. So fair enough. But here, it just feels like, hello, fellow kids. I can write like a teenager would, because, yeah, teen fiction and young adult fiction, it's not written by teenagers most of the time, or adults most of the time. Like, so much of the time it is written by adults, and maybe, actual young adults, people who are in their very late teens or their early 20s, that have maybe gone, oh, I want to write somebody who is my age. But just in general, most people who are at the very least being published traditionally, obviously not just putting their stuff out there on some kind of either a fanfiction type thing, or they're self-publishing maybe. I use fanfiction as a kind of, because this is such a young audience, most young people aren't necessarily going to be going into self-publishing in the same way. But anyway, I'm getting off point. This really sounds like an adult, and I don't know how old Nicholas Pine is / was, because I looked him up at some point and I believe he is no longer with us, but I don't know how old he was when he was writing this, but I'm going to assume not even in his 20s. I'm going to assume 30s, 40s plus, because it really does sound like somebody who has a gap between himself and his teen years. So I'm now at a point, I'm 24, I am probably now at a point where I could not write teen fiction and still have that connection. I could do my best, but I'm starting to get to the point where I would maybe be going, hi fellow kids. I'd have to start being careful with that sort of thing, and I would have some teen readers, not just beta readers in general. I would have actual teen readers, because sometimes it feels like not enough people do that. Adults aren't enough when you're writing. You need to, for your audience anyway, look. like I say, it just feels super hard to do, fellow kids, and it's really off-putting. And if I'm noticing that as somebody who is out of that area, then the teenagers are super gonna notice it. And you know, I read Darren Shan. Sorry, I read Darren Shan a lot when I was in that intended age demographic, and I've read it a bit more as an adult now. And there was an occasional point where I went, "Oh yeah, this is an adult writing for children," but as a kid, it still worked for me. I didn't feel like I was being pandered to. And whereas here, and I use Darren Shan in particular because he's also a horror writer, writing for, I would say, about the same demographic. Now, it's easier to spot Darren Shan's demographic because he's writing a boy who I believe is about 12 off the top of my head. I think he's in secondary school, like early secondary school, but he's about 12 or 13. Whereas the characters in this, they're 17, 18, but they feel, no, not they feel, but the writing feels so much more juvenile than that. I mean, and just in general, really, the writing sounds like it needs refining. There's this one point where one of the characters, Danny, we're following him home at one point, and while there, we get to know his environment. That's fine, and that makes sense, it works. But we then get this exposition dump about his mum, and it's all stuff that absolutely should have just been scattered around the rest of the book. Does novel feel a bit, doesn't quite feel right. Is that rude? Is that catty? It just doesn't feel like I should be calling this a novel. Anyway, point is, I just feel like I could have had that knowledge throughout the rest of the book, and it would have had exactly the same impact. Also, that exposition had zero impact in general, like the knowledge of that. So he does mention it again in passing conversation, like a short version of it, to our lead character, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but it's just like, that's all that would have needed, and it adds about as much to him as the exposition dump did. You sort of go, okay, I've learned a bit about your past. What does that mean? Like, how is that informing your current decisions? How is that informing the way you are as a person now? The reason we explore characters' backstories is because we need to see why they are the people that they are in the present. If I have a character who's mopey and broody, and then we go to explore his backstory, we go, oh, this is the reason you're mopey and broody. But with this character, the environment he's currently in, with him being working class at a school where everybody's upper class in a gated community, that tells you everything. He also lives with a single dad in a house where his dad works all of the fucking time and he has to help his dad with that work. That tells you everything. Learning that his mother is no longer with us and why, and going into some detail with that, didn't add anything to that character. It doesn't add any characterization. You could have said the mother wasn't present and left it at that. It didn't need any more. You don't need an exposition dump. Also, you have to be really careful with exposition dumps. So, if it's done within a narrative, so it's a person talking, sometimes it can work. And it's more likely to work if it's a character talking. Say they've got to this point where emotions are brewing and brewing and brewing, and then exposition dump because they need to get all of their feelings about their past or something. That can work. And you still got to be careful with that as well, that it doesn't feel like suddenly you're going, oh, now I'm getting exposition. But within a narrator's role, huge exposition dumps halfway through a book, I don't think I've ever seen that successfully done. Barring in like high fantasy, it can work because it's one of the reasons I don't really like high fantasy a lot of the time, because it's high fantasy to me just feels like exposition constantly. But it can work there because a lot of the reasons that people like high fantasy, or the same with historical fiction, is that they are looking for that kind of huge world. But it's okay for you to know more about your own characters than your audience does. In fact, you should know more about your characters than your audience does. It doesn't mean that not everything has to go in your novel, and you have to remember what doesn't go into your books though, or your narrative, depending on what you're writing. But consider, so say I have James. James is a Libra. He's 25 and he likes D&D. The fact that he's a Libra doesn't need to be said. Maybe put his birthday in there and people can pick up on the fact that he's a Libra. And if you are into star signs, you can add the supposed traits of a Libra. I mean, you can't because they don't actually exist. But anyway, I'm not getting into that, but it's all quite generic, really. Anyway, and then if you want to have fun with it, but like taking that very seriously, you've got to be careful with it. Anyway, the fact that he's 25, is it important? Probably. Especially if it's going to inform, again, if it informs your reader, if it informs where he is in the world. I'm 24 myself. It's a very awkward point of, maybe they're just fresh out of university and they're kind of getting into the sort of job world, but careers don't really exist anymore, and you're in the awkward middle ground where it's like, okay, I'm definitely at like an adult age now, but like some of my friends are having kids, and so his age is important there. You can say that as a fact. It's easy to say. And the fact that he likes D&D, you don't need to go, James likes D&D. It's showing over telling, and exposition dumps are pure telling. It's something you have to be very careful with, and this book just, it doesn't feel refined. And I don't mean that as in like, oh, a refined palate, I like good wine and cheeses. I mean refined as in it doesn't feel like it's complete enough. It feels like really juvenile writing. And I mean that as in juvenile, as in somebody younger, like somebody fresher to writing rather than somebody younger trying to write it. It just feels like it isn't polished enough. And like I said, I was expecting camp and B-movie and maybe a bit of like, I'm not saying these are B-movies, but like the kind of camp of Hammer horror. I was expecting that sort of stuff, and to an extent I got it. And that kind of cheesy 90s horror type thing, like maybe a bit of Scream or something, like again, camp horror. That's where I wanted to go with this, and it's there, but it doesn't feel right. It needs work. I've seen this sort of writing before when I helped and even ran workshops when I was at university, usually from first year students who, they understand story, they've got that far because it's one of the basics, but they want to tell you everything because they know everything about their entire world and about every one of their characters and all of it. I don't need to know everything, especially not in one go. So, I've got to say I was disappointed with this, but I can't really complain. I did find it for maybe £1 at most in a charity shop, and I could have spent like £94 on it. So, small mercies, I guess. Hopefully Zelda's actual choice will be better. I will find out soon, and you'll find out really soon.
I think since the absolute train wreck of the Spanish Love Deceptions opener, that's been something that I've really focused on. It's not the opening lines of a book isn't something that I've spotted before. I just think in like the time since that, it's been something that I've super focused on because of the state of the opening of that. I've read bad books, but sometimes bad books still have good openers. See Twilight and, to an extent, New Moon. So with that in mind, when I saw the opening to this, I was just like, oh, thank you, chef's kiss. Like a shark, Paul had to keep moving. He slept only when necessary. He had business with the world, codes to crack, so many questions. Tonight, for example, Paul needed to know what fucking was like for a girl. And boom, I am in. Oh, delightful. That was just like, there was, speechless, apparently. And yes, this is queer fiction, it's feminist fiction, clearly rooted in both sort of general queer experience and community and rooted in theory as well. And that's not me saying this is anything specifically drawn from Andrea Lawler's life. I don't know that I mentioned the book. We're looking at Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawler. I would have said it right at the start. This is the problem when I do videos like this, where it's not just like my usual hi, hello, and then I go into a review. When I do the choppy videos like this, half the time I still do the hi, hello because I forget. Anyway, back to it. I'm not saying that this is taken explicitly anything of it from Andrea Lawler's actual life. I'm just saying that this is a sort of mix of queer experience and queer theory type book with some feminism thrown in there as well, with a kind of, clear, there's a kind of difference between queer feminism and, straight feminism, in the same way that, you've got white feminism and black feminism and all that sort of stuff, and not the sort of thing I'm getting into right now because it's a complicated matter that I don't have a huge experience in. I'd have to do some proper research first. My knowledge of feminism is, I think we should have equal rights. I'm not particularly well adept in actual theory. I know who some people are in the space. I've never read anything by Simone de Beauvoir though. Anyway. The theory itself isn't overbearing either, because often, sometimes, within any fiction where you've got a clear theory background in there, it can sometimes feel kind of overbearing, but it feels natural to the characters using that theory. So, for a start, a lot of these characters are in university or sort of surrounded in a university space, and also just generally, this is the early 90s. We're talking very specific waves of feminism, and we are still in the AIDS epidemic, so we've got a lot of people who are protesting for the reasons that millions of people have been allowed to die. This is set in the States as well, so very specifically it is clear that people have been allowed to die. Yes, that is also true in the UK, but it's done differently, I would say. I guess not what we're talking about right now, but the characters feel like people who I have met. In the way that they use theory in their everyday speech of, yes, sometimes it feels like, do people really talk like that? But yeah, they do. And even when you meet these people, sometimes you hear them speak and go, do people really talk like that? But it feels natural, and the theory itself doesn't feel overbearing, and the sort of ways that it is used within the narrative work really nicely. So there's this scene where Paul and his flatmate Christopher are getting ready to go to a protest, and Christopher is of the mindset of kind of protest but be passive about it, sort of have a, I don't think passive is the right word, but like, what's the word when you're anti-violence? Is it passive? Is that the word I'm trying to think of? Like when he wants to be a pacifist, and he believes the education and not to, what's the word? yeah, he doesn't want to alienate people because Paul is very much a case of, all guns blazing, meet them the way they're doing it, the sort of being kind of quote unquote violent about it. And Christopher's like, no, no, we don't want to alienate anybody. We want to educate them, be pacifist about it. And Paul responds with, they don't worry about alienating us. Let me try that again. They don't worry about alienating us when they're beating the crap out of some baby drag queen. Like that, for me, really signifies that kind of mindset that some people have. It's like, no, if you meet them, it's like going to their level. They don't care about learning. The people who are out there being like, let gay people die and let's put as many legislative bills in as possible to kill trans people, be that allowing them to be fucking murdered and not really doing jack shit about it, or allowing suicide rates to go up because you just keep adding bills, and that is in the States and in the UK, you just keep adding shit that fucks trans people over. All of that shit is like, oh, so I'm just supposed to educate them. They don't want to be educated. You have to meet them at their level sometimes because that's the only thing they understand. And I love that. And I love the subtle ways, because sometimes it's theory used explicitly, especially with Jane, and also the group of lesbians that Paul moves in with later. There's a lot of that going on there. But it's also using the ideas of theory in ways like this, which are more subtle, talking about the ways in which we discuss protest. And oh, I love it. And it's clear that, in terms of, like I said earlier, it's a pure theory type stuff meeting just existing within queer communities. And, because our entire lives are politicized, therefore you do get to know some ideas of the theory around queerness and gender identity simply by existing. You do not have to have studied at a university to be able to know that. And I'm not saying everybody does, and obviously, there are ways in which you have to learn your history because it is important, but just existing in these spaces, you get to understand ideologies and theories, and it's so clear the ways in which all of that has come together to create this book, and it's so fascinating. And the way that Lola understands intricacies as well, not just sort of broad spectrum type stuff, like really subtle, like I say, intricacies, specifically surrounding gender, really got me as well, because it's just something that hang on. I need to go back to script, because if I don't, I'll start rambling and going off. So, Paul is a shapeshifter. Now, not in the way that, if at will he can go, I'm a lion now. It's more subtle than that. He's either, it's weird where it's fluid, yet remaining on that gender spectrum thing of like, he's usually either just Paul or Polly, but there's gender and sex mixed here. It's less about turning into a woman, it's more about experiencing life with a different body. And sometimes it's about experiencing life in a different body, but sometimes it's about experiencing life sort of more feminine, more female, and the differences there, and what it's like being a straight woman in a bar experiencing that, or being hit on by a lesbian, and all that sort of stuff, and having sex as a girl, be that that opening paragraph, but be that in a kind of banal, heterosexual way of, like, 3-minute mission read. Did you finish 2 kind of way? Or be that in a somehow this went on for 3 days with a lesbian because, we just need a little bit in between kind of thing, and it just goes on and on and on. And the way that fits with the way the narrator refers to Paul is so fascinating. So like I say, he's Paul or Polly to characters, but narrator, again, that's kind of interchangeable, but he's almost, from what I noticed, he's almost, if not always, he within the narrator's narration. And it's so hard to explain why that really got to me, because a lot of this book is feeling like it's about fluidity, but also about having roots as well. So it's clear that Paul has a kind of complex idea of where he is with gender identity and all that sort of stuff, because there are times where he's not sure if he is Paul or Polly or both or neither. And he also, as it gets later on where he isn't sure, it's clear that he has like a base, and it's not a kind of, this is who he really is, but more okay, there's the blank slate that I can work with, and it's just the roots there. And the idea of fluidity as both an internal and an external expression, and the differences there, it just... Oh. And, I'm aware that with fluidity, with some people, the idea of not needing a base, or, the thing with pronouns being constantly changing, that's either not very important, they sort of like use anything, or it's depending on where they are in the day, sort of more leaning towards masc or femme, they would change their pronouns on that, and how that's very individual. But it's also very clear that this is also a story about how everything is both super individual, but how there are so many shared feelings when it comes to this sort of stuff, and it's in here. Now, just a quick reminder again, Paul, Polly, same person, just in case I use them interchangeably. So Polly is with her, again, I'll be using them interchangeably as well, because the book uses them interchangeably, whether it be other characters or the narrator. Anyway, Polly is sat with that big group of lesbians that they're living with, and brain, and one of them brings in a newspaper. Basically, they come in and say, oh, Butch has been killed, and they specifically use the word Butch. Now, when they talk about the headline itself reads, I might not be quoting directly here, but it is effectively man posing as woman found dead. Quick correction, what I meant to say was woman posing as man, but I think I just said that the other way around. So it's important, what it actually said is woman posing as man, but I said man posing as woman. Now, Paul spots that, and I did as well, that's kind of way less likely to be about a butch lesbian than it is to be that kind of newspaper code for trans man, but we're going to dead name them throughout, and we're only going to use female pronouns. That's how that read to me, and it's clear that that's how that read to Paul. Now, that's not said, but Paul uses he pronouns for the deceased, and then is very quickly met with the person that brought the newspaper in by her going she. And it's subtle, it's so small, because there is such a big, especially now you look at the way that movements are with feminists who, look at J.K. Rowling and Posey Parker, all those sorts of people, the TERFs, who are kind of trans men don't exist, they're just butch lesbians who have gone astray, and trans women are just men, and all of that. That's how that read to me. That small interaction, that's the kind of woman that I see the woman bringing the newspaper as. And given that she's in her 20s, in the early 90s, she would now be the right age to be in that group of the older lesbians who are now like, disgusting, trans people don't exist, but if they do, they're predators, and we don't actually know what we're talking about. You know what I mean? And it's always these small interactions that tell you that Andrea Lawler is discussing so much more, and that is just brilliant in her writing. It's and it's clear with like sexuality too. So often with discussions of sexuality, we see it as a very kind of monosexuality discussions of being gay, lesbian, or straight, you know, just one other gender, sort of your opposite or your same kind of thing. I don't believe a sexuality term is ever used with Paul beyond being very fluid, like I said, with the gender as well. There's just a general fluidity going round. I think in my head I was using the word bi, but I think that's just a case of that's what I am, so that's just what sticks out in my head. But even when she's talking in gender terms, Lawler hits so many brilliant points with sexuality terms as well. And obviously there is some case of them being intertwined, you know, with the case of sort of masculinity and femininity and the way they fit into sexuality, especially in the queer community. Though, you know, with straight people as well, you know, the how masculine you are or feminine you are does play into that, but there's sort of a generally accepted there's generally more of an acceptance of an exploration there within queer communities for obvious reasons, really. But during the time where Paul has been living as Polly for a while with the big group of lesbians, as I mentioned, he's been in a relationship with a woman called Diane. Now, for a while, Diane doesn't know that Paul can change, but like, she knows Polly and doesn't really understand what Polly is, as it were, rather than, you know, as in a shapeshifter. But at some point, now Paul has not changed in that whole time. They have been Polly the whole time they've been in the relationship, living with Diane. But as soon as Diane finds out that Polly can change and has been other in the past, they start to worry and be like, but you're going to get bored, you're going to want to be a man again, you're going to want to explore what sex is like as a man again, you're going to want this, you're going to want that, you're going to get bored. And if that didn't rattle my bi little fucking bones, I don't know what would, because that hit me in a way, because that is such a common thing that people talk about when they date bi people, where they're like, but you're going to get bored and you're going to want to go back. So like, if you're a bi person dating a woman, they may be like, but you're going to want to know what sex is like with a man, either for the first time or again, and you're going to want the other, you're not going to want me, you're going to get bored. It's like, the level of insecurity for a start, but also like, are you, so if you're a woman in a relationship with a man, are you the sort of person that's always going to be like, say you're with a straight man, oh, you're always going to want to be sleeping with other women, you're going to get bored? If not, what is the difference with bisexuals? Newsflash, there fucking isn't one. It's not a case of boredom. If they decide to then go out and sleep with somebody else, that isn't boredom, that's just cheating. It's regular cheating, whether they're bi or straight or whatever. Doesn't fucking matter. Anyway. But, like I say, that rattled my bones. And, you know, there it's talking about gender, but just the intricacies mixed with sexuality. And I am just in awe of this book and Lola's writing, and I need to see and find more of her writing because mwah, fucking beautiful. I tell you what, Zelda, when she's picking for herself, has much better taste than Zelda when she's picking for Lily. Because this, ooh, absolutely, by the end of the year, going to be a fave. And I would not be surprised if it is well up in the top 10 because I know we're super early in the year for me to be saying that, but I can feel it because this hit me in such a way. I need to find more fiction like this that explores gender and sexuality in a way that feels natural and fresh and new, and I just and it's non-binary in a way, fluid rather than non-binary, I would say, because it is still kind of generally more male and female, but also not really, and also kind of, but like in that messing with gender in a way that doesn't feel kind of cheesy or played up for laughs or anything like that. It's not like cutesy and fun, but it's also not like overly camp. It's not gender for a joke. It's like just sits warm in here, and I fucking love it, and I think you will too. So So with what's coming up, I don't know. I know that there will be no Bad Rep Book Club this month. There will be one at the end of next month, so there will be 3 videos at the end, the last week of the month. Or bit probably just be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, basically being wrap up of the first 50 Shades, wrap up of the second, and then the actual review of the third. Hopefully that all goes better than the last time. And there might be a couple of reviews here and there between now and then. If not, I have a couple of library books here, that's why I say that, but I'm probably just going to take my time with them rather than just try and rush out and get them out sort of thing. So, you know, you get them when you get them. And then after April, when we get into May, I will probably pick up regularly scheduled programming again, but it will probably be more one review a week and then maybe some other content throughout the rest of the week, barring sometimes if I am feeling up to it there will be more. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourselves. Right,